Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Gulf Coast Growth Show. I'm Chad Burke with the Economic Alliance Houston Port Region. I have the privilege of filling in today on the show and talking with one of my good friends and partners and co-chairs, Callie Barnes with the Port of Houston. Her official title is Director of Seaport Connectivity, but she also happens to be co-chair with me on the Greater Houston Freight Committee, which is kind of innocuous. It's like, what does that do, right? So we're going to dive into that a little bit. But first, Callie, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody a little bit about where you came from and what your background is.
Sure. So came to the city of Houston about 18 years ago. Was hired to work on the GEC, which is the General Engineering and Construction for Grand Parkway, for every segment of Grand Parkway, which was a great highlight of my career.
Thank you for your work on that.
Yes. And now I live right off of Grand Parkway on the north side and love it. And so worked on that for several years, worked on Grand Parkway Segment C. That was a big one, and got the environmental clearance for that shortly after TxDOT says, we want you to come work directly for us because of that clearance. And so went to TxDOT, stayed there for about 6.5 years. Worked on 249 Tollway, Grand Parkway Segment B. Still got.
Thank you for 249 Tollway.
Yes, yeah.
I'm just going to keep saying these things during it.
So Houston's been very.
I use it very often. So yeah.
Yeah, Houston's been very good to me with my career because I like working on the mega projects, and that's what Houston does. We do everything bigger and better, including our roadways.
We'll get to our own mega projects here in a little bit.
Yeah. Still working on the big ones. So went to consulting for a little while after that, back to consulting, and then HGC shortly, reached out and went to HGC for about 3.5 years. Conducted all the carryover spin down efforts, spent $900 million in 4 waves in a year, which was fun, while tracking about $2 billion of projects of all the projects in the region and keeping those on track for milestones. Been with the Port of Houston for about 10 months and continuing.
Even been a year yet.
No.
You've made a big impression so far, but it hadn't even been a year yet. Okay,
right.
So, all right.
Yeah. All right. We've had a lot going on. Yeah. So continuing my learning education is what I told Charlie when he hired me. So thanks, Charlie, for helping to continuing my education in this massive city. So learning all things port now, trucks, freight movement, and kind of incorporating that into my heavy background of service transportation with TxDOT.
2 things commenting on your background. One, and then since I've gotten to know you, one, the funding and construction of these large projects is an enigma to most people in the world. The fact that you have the background, the very specific background that you have with TxDOT, with HGC, and now with the port, to be able to kind of weave that together to, 1, understand how projects get done, and 2, to be effective in getting them done. We are very, very fortunate, honestly, to have you in this role. So that's my number 1 kind of observation for our audience and members and everybody out there. And then 2, I like the way you said your continuing education, because the one thing I've noticed about you is just your incredible curiosity and fearlessness of just saying, I'm learning about everything in the Port of Houston, and you're just soaking it all up. So your curiosity and your willingness to just kind of say, I didn't even know that. Let's learn all about that, right? Is really, it's neat. It's refreshing. It's a very great kind of asset or talent to have. So I love that about you, and it's perfect for what we're trying to get done. So anyway,
One thing I've learned is if you think you have a question and you're in a room full of people, more than
everybody
else is, they're just acting like they know.
We're like, well, Callie's going to ask the question.
They're waiting for me to ask the question. Yes, they probably are.
And when you do, I'm like, oh, thank God she asked the question.
I'm not worried.
I love that.
We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and
I love
we
that.
cannot know everything, but we can, ask questions. That's how you get smarter, right?
Absolutely.
And get things done.
Absolutely. Well, that's neat. So as I mentioned, you and I have the fun, I call it a fun job of co-chairing the Greater Houston Freight Committee. I was telling a friend the other day, I don't know if it was a friend or a group I was talking to, and I was like, okay, I chair the Greater Houston Freight Committee, the GHFC. It's a subcommittee of the TPC, which is a committee in the HGAC. And they were like, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
So let's start, I guess, at the bottom. We probably should start the other way, but let's start at the bottom and build up. The Greater Houston Freight Committee. Mm-hmm. So give the audience a thumbnail of what our committee is there. And then we'll talk about how it feeds into TPC and then what TPC is to HGAC.
Okay. So I was with HGAC for 3.5 years, but I did not really get heavily involved with the Greater Houston Freight Committee, just because of the scale of what I was doing with the other projects. So fairly new, but my 10,000 foot view of the Greater Houston Freight Committee is it's a TPC appointed, Transportation Policy Council appointed committee. There's only one other TPC appointed committee, I believe, and it's the Safety Committee. Mm-hmm. And so the next level down is what typically appoints subcommittees, which is the Technical Advisory Committee.
Or the TAC.
It's a highly regarded, or the TAC, right?
It's all abbreviations.
Right. Yeah. We love our acronyms. But TPC appointed Greater Houston Freight Committee as a committee about 16 years ago, from my understanding. It's a combination of private and public sector. And the intention, from my understanding, is to ensure that freight wasn't kind of lost in the shuffle. Yep. Because one of TPC's major roles and responsibilities is to direct $2 billion of funds to transportation projects throughout our region. So from my understanding, it was created to make sure that we understood the issues of freight within our region, the needs of freight within our region, priorities, and to ensure that those priorities were relayed to our policy council.
Kind of elevate the issues and the priorities that are coming from freight, which drives so much of our economy, which, and people have used this phrase all the time, freight doesn't vote, right? Industry doesn't vote, right? It's citizens. And so you get a very kind of disproportionate amount of input for commuter traffic than freight traffic when you break it down to, okay, what does this mean to our economy, which feeds right back into the jobs we create, which create all those communities and those people that want to, have their commutes nice and easy in and out. So it's kind of a circle of life, but it does. The Freight Committee gives that industry sector a voice in transportation, which is really critical, I think.
Which is part of the reason why they have the private sector. And that's not typical of a TPC appointed or a TAC, Technical Advisory Committee appointed committee or subcommittee. Typically, those are, like you said, those are the public entities. So it's unique in that way that we've invited the public sector to have that voice. And that's really important because, like I've been learning, the last 10 months about just how much the economy is impacted by the port operations, and not just Port Houston, just throughout the state.
Yeah. Now, okay, so we've got the Freight Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Transportation Policy Council, which is a committee within the Houston-Galveston Area Council, right? And that is, I'll let you work there. You know it better than me. Give them the brief of the HGAC.
So HGAC is the kind of the head umbrella, and under that you've got the Transportation Policy Council, which we're most familiar with, and then below that you've got your Technical Advisory Committee, and they are supposed to. It's a committee. We go just like Transportation Policy Council, sit around the table, and we listen to the same things that are supposed to be rolled up to the Policy Council, and we're supposed to advise the Policy Council on how, what we learned about the presentations and forthcoming. So really the same thing is presented at the Policy Council as should be submitted or presented at the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee. Too many acronyms. They just changed that one. It used to be the Transportation Advisory Committee.
So it's no longer
about
TAC?
3 months ago. No, still TAC. They changed the Transportation to Technical Advisory Committee. So that just happened. So I keep reverting back to my old ways of that.
And the Policy Council is, like you said, it's the one that has authority over that very large budget for infrastructure projects, right?
The TPC manages the Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Yes.
So they are the bosses of $2 billion of funds that are distributed. The reviewer, the approver, the final say. All the HGAC staff essentially works for TPC. They're the managing authority for the whole 8-county region, hundreds of cities, lots of opinions on priorities. You can only imagine.
Yeah. What is it, 13 counties?
It's 13. 13 in the larger, but it's 8 in
the metropolitan. And that's a council of governments, which is a term a lot of people don't hear, but it is the regional council of governments, literally where money flows into and is then dispersed out into communities and projects. Yeah.
And the other part of that is that our region is in non-attainment for air quality.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though you might not, a local sponsor might not have federal funding or the project's not on system, if it's considered regionally significant and could impact our air quality, there's something called conformity, which is a monster of a process that HGC has to go through ever so often. So that's like a whole nother layer of what they do, what the HGC does for our region as well.
Very good. Very good. All right. So we kind of know that we're targeting to try and help and prioritize projects that are freight related into kind of the consciousness and priorities of the TPC. So let's step back down and say, what are these big freight infrastructure projects that we need to complete here in the Houston Port region? What are the big things we've been working on lately?
So to just take one little step back, give you kind of an update of where HGC is right now. They have a call for projects for the Long Range 2050 Regional Transportation Plan.
Uh-huh.
And so we are in the middle of July 17th. I've got to enter all of our priority for Port of Houston projects into that long range plan. And essentially the goal is really the purpose of that long range plan is for projects to flow through that down into time. And then when it hits the 4-year window, which is the Transportation Improvement Program, that will be, when I call it the real money. The long range plan is hopeful and more than likely coming.
Mm-hmm.
It does need to be fiscally constrained. But when you're within the 4 years, that money is coming. You have a guarantee that not 100% guaranteed, probably like a 95% guarantee. And so we're in the process of identifying and submitting those projects, heavy projects for Port of Houston. Our SH225, that's a massive project that underwent a planning and environmental linkages study that was completed in 2024. That was all of 225, and then the 610 East was included in that study. When I got to Port of Houston, I decided that it was best to prioritize the 225 out of that Pell study, simply because the bridge on 610 was $3.6 billion.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a heavy ask. So
we already have one bridge under construction right now. We couldn't have two bridges under construction at the same time crossing the ship channel.
Yeah. Yeah. So the funding is short with TxDOT right now. They a little bit overspent in 2024. So they're pulling back funding on environmental schematic projects, which is unfortunately the funding that we need to initiate, like 225. We also have direct connectors at Barber's Cut that we need. And then also at Port Road, we have a 1-lane direct connector. We want to widen those to 2 lanes. So we're submitting that project in that long range plan. And then we have another project, Bayport Southern Access Road, which is giving Bayport Terminal trucks more of like a circular movement.
It's almost it's a second, or you come in, you drop off, and then you kind of go out the back door instead of having to go back out the front door.
Yeah. So we are getting ready to go into construction for the phase 1 of that project, and then we're submitting phase 2 of that project, which would just be an extension further east and up to Port Road. And then there's a phase 3, which is the direct connectors, which will feed in off of 146 to that road. We've got 146 construction ongoing, which everyone is painfully aware of. So those are kind of the big projects. 610 is going to have to come, even though it's a monster of a funding, it's going to have to come fairly quickly after 225, because you can't, if you fix 225, they're still going to bottleneck at 610.
It flows right into that
figure it out
intersection, basically. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned 146. So which ones are under construction, and what are the timetables for that? And then just give us your best guess on 225.
225 would be more complicated. 146 construction anticipated to end construction at the end of 2028, not fiscal year, end of calendar year 2028. TxDOT is doing everything they can to help us with that project. They're going to have to close. Right now at Port Road, we have some major issues with our trucks backing up into our terminal along Port Road because they're backing up from 146. At that intersection of Port Road and 146, there's a direct connector and an at grade, and the trucks are having to merge, which is causing some issues.
Back on to 146, right there, where they come off of the direct connector.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the construction is going to require in about 3 to 4 months, they're going to have to close that at grade. So one of those two are going to go away. Everybody go on the direct connector.
Oh my goodness.
So, but in that closure will be longer term. It won't just be a weekend. It'll be over a month and maybe 2, maybe 3. But TxDOT is working very diligently. You'll see weekend closures pretty often recently. What they're doing is they're trying to do everything they can in that area around it up to
while the trucks aren't flowing
to eliminate some of that time on the 2 to 3 month span.
Well, that is good. Yeah. And working on the weekends when the trucks aren't really flowing, then that's going to help out a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's it'll be a great project once it's completed.
No, it's going to be as they all end up being. They're like, "Oh, we're done, thank you," and it's beautiful and the traffic flows. But it's the pain between the two spots.
But the contractor and the head of TxDOT, the district engineer, have been told that they have been looking at ways to do their best to make it as easier, if that's even a word, with people that have to drive that out there. But they're doing everything they can. It's just they're constrained a lot by the bridges. They've got to do several bridges over the waterways. So it looks like they have right of way. I meet with them quarterly, the area office as well, and the district. But it looks like you have right of way. You're like, why don't you just add a lane over here? Well, you're going to bottleneck it at the bridge over the waterway anyway.
Because it goes right back down.
Right. So they're doing everything they can. It's just, unfortunately, it's just construction.
Yeah. All right. So, nobody's listening. We're not going to write this down, but give me your best guess on our schedule for Highway 225 redevelopment. Kind of walk us through what you think our best case scenario would be for approval, funding, construction.
So I built out a schedule a few weeks ago for 225, and based on the schedule of what I know for National Environmental Policy Act clearance and schematic and detailed design, utilities, right of way, we're looking just to get to environmental and schematic clearance. We're looking at about 8 years. And that's if we got funding today. And that's best case scenario. And it never happens best case scenario. You're always going to have hiccups along the way. You're going to have, contract issues. Oh, you got extra right away over here. Go do some more environmental analysis. And so after that point of 8 years, you're going to build in your detailed design, which can go a little bit quicker if you do your schematic in a good way, up until that 8 year point. And then utilities right away, add in, we're about 13, 14 years out from seeing a truck on a and that is like best case scenario. And so that's really. That's the driver of the advocacy for 225, because I know that, and I have the schedule in my mind, and I put it on paper, and I was like, okay, there it is. And it's just unfortunate that the federal process is what it is, and so there's ways that we're looking at. We're advocates of the SPEED Act, and that's going to expedite the NEPA process, which could shave a year, maybe 2 off of that, but we don't have funding, and that's if we had funding today. So that's kind of the push, because Port Houston anticipates to potentially double within 10 years. And so with that, we're already 4 years behind, right?
Well, and I mean, some would argue that we're already at near capacity between 8 and 5 o'clock on Highway 225 as we speak, right? I mean, the number of trucks is measured in the tens of thousands that traverse that. And it's not all just going to Port Houston. We know how many trucks go in and out 2 and 3 times a day in and out of the port terminals. That doesn't even consider the 250 chemical manufacturers that are and suppliers and other industrial kind of companies that are putting trucks on the road every day up and down Highway 225 and 146. So. It's a bit depressing when you put it in hard numbers like that, but and especially when you consider the growth that's about to come and potential, for new terminals and even more cargo coming in and out of Houston. We are definitely a victim of our own success, it's just it is a laborious process to work through what will be a really large project.
Yeah.
To create more capacity in the nation's busiest port, right?
Well, something else to consider. I've hired a consultant and we're looking at the negative impacts to like keep delaying 225. I met with them yesterday and I said, something else kind of came to mind. I said, well, think about this. Like all of the impacts to the port right now, the trucks are backing up into the terminal on 146. Imagine we wait until we double and then start construction of 225. It's like, that's like a case scenario right there. Like let's try not to do that again.
Yeah.
So I guess that's
in the construction process, like we're seeing on 146, it's gonna be painful to go through that construction process while 10 years from now, when we have grown another double, 2x of what we're doing right now. As I've told you before, I am very interested to see what the study is for potential lost revenue. So if you think about it, it's one of the main cases that we have to make when trying to raise the priority and get the funding for this project as quickly as possible. And you know this, I did the same thing kind of back of the napkin with a model that I created about 4 or 5 years ago now. And I went back and looked at that number the other day. And so you take just the average growth of the Port of Houston over the last 12 to 15 years. And then at some point, because of capacity, if you cap that, and this is a lot more simple than what the study is going to produce from the consultants. But if you cap that at a certain point, because we cannot move any more trucks in and out, and then we begin losing or leaking business to other ports, the next 10 years, we would lose $238 billion in economic value. And that was just, like I said, that's kind of back of the napkin guess based on just where we have come from the last 12 years, right? So it's going to be a very large number that we put at risk in Houston, in the greater Houston area, in the Port of Houston, if we can't move our product in and out effectively and efficiently, right? So it becomes a real concern. And people are like, well, why does that matter? I mean, we don't want more business. Well, that's why our economy is growing. That's why it's one of the most robust economies, in the state, in the country. It creates the opportunities. It drives housing and retail demand. It allows people to raise their families and educate their kids, and a great environment that we have around the greater Houston area. So
20% of the GDP of Texas is not a small number.
Yeah.
And then the way I've done the math, I think your number was probably right about at the time. But since then, we've done what's called a Martin study. I think it was finished in 2022. So $439 billion to the state of Texas. And so if you're going to double that, if you're going to double your operations, you can only imagine that it would probably double that amount. You can't really say that for sure.
But it's going to be close.
I'm not sure how they do the study. I'm not that technical on that aspect. But if within 10 years, your current is 439 and in 10 years you're going to double, you can only imagine that number could double as well. Yeah. So that's a potential loss if you're deterring those businesses.
We don't want to lose business to other cities.
Right.
All right. So y'all can see we have the expert with us, right? Callie is fantastic at what she does, and she's one of the only people I know that knows how to navigate this system to get these projects done. And so we're really fortunate to have her. I am blessed to have her as co-chair, and have learned a lot from her as we've kind of got into it. And we're excited about our committee meetings that we've had and have coming up. So if you see information on a Greater Houston Freight Committee meeting, come out and check it out. It's kind of open to the public. We send it out to a lot of folks, and it's got great information, and they will continue to be that way. So I'm looking forward to continuing working with you. Any final comments?
No, I feel the same. TPC, we're getting ready to give our presentation
tomorrow morning. Yeah, that's right.
That's the first presentation that Greater Houston Freight Committee, from my knowledge, since I was at HGC, is reporting out to our creating committee, our creating policy council who created the Greater Houston Freight Committee. We're going to tell them what we're doing.
Exactly.
So I think that's kind of exciting that we're starting.
I'm very excited about that. Yeah. It's going to be great. I think it's going to be well received too, because the information we can bring to them is going to be really interesting, critical information on a lot of different fronts moving forward.
Well, the purpose
Yeah.
of it was to
Right.
make sure that they were informed about the priorities and what we're doing, and
We're
the importance of
gonna
freight.
lay some knowledge on them tomorrow morning, I think.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Callie, for coming, and appreciate everybody listening. I think I'm supposed to say like and share. Is that right, Mandy? So I'm talking to Mandy behind the camera. But that will wrap up this version of the Gulf Coast Growth Show. Again, thank you to my partner in crime, Callie Barnes, and we will see you next time.